I acknowledge them in the announcement. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, June 11, 2024, to be deferred. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
Questions that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor.
I wish to welcome the Class 4 students of George Lamont Primary School and their teachers, the principal, Mr. Marlon Wilson, Year Head Class 4, Mr. Ryan Brewster, teacher Dwayne Hackett, teacher Kennedy Haynes. I hope you all find this session enlightening to you and that you will take back what you learned to your schools and to your secondary schools and in your public life when you start to work. Welcome once more.
Petitions, papers, messages from Her Excellency the President, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 7, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology, to move the passing of a resolution that the Parliament of Barbados take note of the Barbados Population Policy 2023.
Honourable member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and please permit me to join you in welcoming students of the George Lamming School, which sits, as you know, between our two constituencies. You know, we always say that people don't live in constituencies, they live in communities. So too do our students. And so I am pleased to greet the students and, as you have, wish them well in their educational journey onward. Sir, I am similarly very, very privileged, and perhaps it is fitting that we have these students who represent very much what Barbados is and will be joining us for this conversation to take note of the Barbados Population Policy 2023 to 2040. And I think it is important to say from the outset that this policy means to address a broad range of issues and how we respond to those issues across a multi-year period, across generations, really. And we have 2023 to 2040 as the date for the policy, but we could easily have said 2050 or 2060. Because the matters that concern us with respect to population will and do concern us for many generations to come. Sir, I just late last week was working with some colleagues, sitting with some colleagues from all around the world, looking at issues of digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and so on. And one of the conveners of the meeting, in framing the meeting, said that he considered that the world is confronted by three key existential issues. He said this, I had not met the individual before, but I want to share what he said. He said that the first of those issues is climate, the climate crisis, and how our physical environment is responding to and is being affected by the way we live, the climate crisis. He said that the second has to do with digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and future technology, and that this is existential. It will change everything about how we live, how we learn, how we work, how we produce, how we interact. It is already changing all of those things. Climate, digital transformation, AI, and future technology. And the third, he said at a meeting on AI and digital transformation, that the third existential issue that we face is population. Whether there are enough of us on the planet, whether there are too many of us on the planet in some places, and whether there are too few of us on the planet in other places. Issues of migration, issues of sexual and reproductive health and rights, all of the things that concern us and how we live and how we reproduce ourselves as a species, that he considered that that was the third and very important existential issue that faces humanity today. I found it curious that, in fact, all three of the existential issues I happen to be directly working on, so that puts a little bit of pressure, I suppose. But it did perhaps confirm that I am working in the right place at the right time and with the right group of people on these issues. So population, how we live and how we move and how we regenerate as humankind, that is the issue that concerns us today. Now, sir, when we came to service as a government in 2018, the question of the size of our population and the composition of our population was one that concerned us from that moment. We could see, we saw, that along with all of the other things that we had to settle and solve, along with the mission-critical, emergency, early mission-critical issues like the question of getting buses back on the road, getting garbage trucks back in communities to collect garbage, returning free tertiary education to Barbadians as a pathway to income generation and social mobility. How we were able to stabilize the economy, return the reserves to a healthy level. All of these issues, that's just a sample of them, perhaps were more, not easy to solve, but were more immediately solvable than the issue of population. We knew that the fact of a declining and aging population, and I'll get to some of the specifics on that in a moment, but we knew that that matter was one that we couldn't simply write a program for. It was one that we couldn't simply write a single prescription for or a single response to, and that it would need to occupy some of the best minds among us and outside of us, that we would need to ask others who concern themselves with these issues to look at this question of the population size and composition of Barbados. Why? The question of development of a society is one in which people collectively establish the ways in which we want to live. We collectively establish what are the things that we value. Do we value access to education? Do we value protection of the environment? Do we value a certain level of social investment in housing and in infrastructure? We ask ourselves whether we value those things, whether we want to ensure that the state continues to invest in those things, and then, therefore, what does it require in order to continue to have access to those values, those things that we value? Sir, the question of development is allowing people the choice, the opportunity to choose the things that they value. The business of development that we are all here concerned with is to expand and maintain and sustain the range of choices available to people with respect to the lives and the things that they value. And we decide that collectively. So we considered in 2018 that the question of our population and whether we had enough people, whether we had enough people of a certain age to be able to continue to sustain the lifestyle that we collectively have determined that we value, that is the business that concerns us here today. And that is why we decided, and I had the pleasure at the time, the tremendous privilege really, of being Minister in Economic Affairs and Investment and having been asked by the Cabinet to set us on the path to start to answer some of these questions. And what did that path look like? First, we as a government could never believe that we have all of the answers, that we have all of the ideas, that we have done all of the thinking. We can't. And when you see from time to time that we reach across and out and inside and around the globe and right here in Barbados to bring other ideas to contend, that is why. The irony is that the restrictions of population also affect the extent to which we can address the issue of population. The fact that we have limited human resources. I know that there are those of us who don't like the expression human resources because it sounds a little bit too utilitarian. It sounds like we are using people just as a means of production. I'm sure the honourable member who does not like that language will speak to it when he gets to his feet. But the extent to which we are even able to solve these policy issues also itself relates to the population question. Put quite simply, here in Barbados we find that we call on, we utilize the same resources, the same people, the same brains, the same minds, the same time for all of the different tasks that we have to do. And so it is not something that is sustainable. We need to bring in other minds and other talent and other ideas, not just because we want to apply different kinds of thinking and expertise to the topic, but also because we would never believe that we ourselves have the answers. And so we put together a population commission. Sir, let me say that I have been a part of, involved in, associated with many areas and efforts of work. And I cannot say that I have seen or been associated with more stellar work and engagement than I have seen with this population commission. From the outset, the way that they frame the issues, the initial population situational analysis that they shared with us even before a census was available, this 2021 census, allowed us to have an appreciation of the issues, sir, in such a fulsome way that I have to say that, I mean, impressed is perhaps too glib an expression. I was transformed, sir, by the level of effort and commitment of the commissioners to this topic, to finding all of the data, to listening to others, to considering all the issues. And so, sir, I want to go on record to thank the commissioners by name. Sir, she will be embarrassed by what I'm about to say, but I will say it anyway, because I believe that I am getting to the age now where I feel that you have to acknowledge people's contribution to our lives, to population, to society, when they are around to hear it, and when others can also add to that, to those acknowledgements. Sir, this may sound strange to say, but I've never really been one who believes in mentorship. That sounds strange. Let me tell you why. I find that the way that we draw or reframe a mentor is as if it's the perfect individual that you must emulate. And the reason that I've never tried to offer myself as this thing called mentor with a capital M is that I feel that people are flawed and there are attributes that we want to emulate. There are attributes that we can take as examples in their individual expression, but then there are also other attributes that we may want to set aside that individuals have simultaneously. Likewise, I think that we see examples of how to live in the least likely of places. And there are people who may not consider themselves mentors, or we may not say that who are mentoring us, whose examples of life really encourage us. I see that every day. I see that in Lee and Mali from Carnon Village. I see that in Miss Brathwaite. I see that in people who are people that I encounter every day that we don't have any formal structure called mentorship, but in the way they live their lives, I'm encouraged. But if there were ever to be anyone who I might consider closest to that notion of mentor, somebody certainly from whom I have learned so much as a young professional and as a person, it is the woman who chaired the Population Commission, Ms. Roberta Clark. And I will say this quickly because I know this is not the core of the subject, the reason we've come here. But in Roberta Clark, I learned, from Roberta Clark, I learned, or started to learn, I'm not quite there yet, she's perfected it far better, the art and the science of bringing people closer to you in ideology, drawing people closer, meeting them where they are and drawing them closer, even the least likely of allies on a subject. She does it in a way that seems almost magical, but it is not magical. It calls for attributes that we have to practice every day, of convening, of engagement, of finding common ground. And I dare say that that is one of the reasons and that approach is one of the reasons that this work has been so successful. But it is not just Roberta Clark as chair. It's Waynell Allen-Jones as deputy chair, Dr. Jonathan Lashley from the University of the West Indies, Dr. Madhavanti Maddie Murphy, also from the University of the West Indies. I looked at the list and I saw Pierce Rudder, and I wondered who that was, but then I remember that Antonio Boo Rudder's first name is Pierce. He was also a commissioner. Ms. Janelle Scantleberry-Munsey, who works with the Barbados Fiscal Service, and Mr. Jerome Wood, as well as Ms. Yolanda Alling, who worked on the environmental, planning, ecological concerns of the policy. From the Ministry of Economic Affairs at the time, Mr. Delano Scantleberry and Ms. Vanell Savory worked tirelessly on the setting up of meetings, on the provision of data. And we were also pleased to have, not from the outset, but sometimes, sir, when partners see their mandate reflecting in the work that you're doing as a country, that is perhaps the best possible scenario in which they come on board with your effort. And so the UN Population Fund, who helped provide some information, some framing, but also allowed us to have the key and rare expertise of Dr. Godfrey St. Bernard, a demographer and statistician who worked along with the team. And so I am eternally grateful, not just on behalf of the government of Barbados, but on a personal level as someone who is concerned with development issues professionally. The work that this commission has done is, and I have to say, sir, that, from time to time, there are utterances in this place that suggest that this government is allocating resources to expertise in circumstances where it is not necessary. Sir, the commissioners that put this policy together were paid a mere stipend, so mere as to go without mentioning, really. And the value that they have created, I'm not sure what is the price that we could put on it. And so I pause there because I want us to understand that there are people still among us who give of themselves to help us solve some of these issues of life and living. But if there had been a larger cost associated with this, it would absolutely have been worth it because of the level of work that we've seen from these commissioners. And so, sir, to make reference to the resolution that brings us here today, I want to ensure that we, through you, take the country through exactly why we are here. Sir, I'm being reminded that I must be clearer in my language to go on the record to say to the commissioners, I thank you for your stellar contribution to the work of the government of Barbados and to the people of Barbados. So to come to the resolution that brings us here today. Whereas the government of Barbados recognizes certain critical population trends over the last 40 years, including consistent fertility rates below the replacement rate of 2 to 1 children per woman, growth in the proportion of the elderly population, declining percentage of people of working age, and higher dependency ratios due to a reducing number of persons of working age and a greater proportion of elderly people. And whereas the government recognizes these current population trends can negatively affect economic growth and impede the capacity of the state to leverage the full productivity of the country's resources and meet the social care and security needs of its population. And whereas the government of Barbados has established a National Population Commission to advise on population issues, and this commission has engaged in extensive consultations with stakeholders, including representatives in the public sector, the private sector, the labor movement, other members of the third sector, and the general public. And whereas the Population Commission highlighted the need for a Barbados population policy to address the potential impediments and opportunities related to the projections in population structure and size, and whereas the government of Barbados has accepted that a Barbados population policy should be developed based around a set of population goals and targeted interventions and strategies to achieve the government's medium and long-term economic and social objectives. And whereas the Cabinet has approved the Barbados Population Policy 2023, and whereas the Barbados Population Policy outlines 3 policy goals and related sub-goals, be it resolved that the Parliament of Barbados take note of the Barbados Population Policy 2023. Sir, in 2021, also while I was Minister with responsibility for economic affairs, we embarked on a national population and housing census. We really were seeking to validate some of the things that we were already seeing with respect to an aging population, with respect to a declining population, and with respect to certain other population trends that were having an impact on the productivity of the country. So we saw, experienced in our policy making, in our moving around the country, we all have seen how the population of Barbados is changing. But a population and housing census is required every 10 years. And challenged by, at the time, the pandemic and by other factors, we needed to press on with this population and housing census. Now, the census showed us, and I want to say from the outset that, like any other survey, there are things like undercounts and other anomalies in the taking of data, which means that there's a level of flexibility. There's a level of standard deviation. There are ways in which these numbers have the potential to shift, and really we're talking about estimated numbers in some cases based on a count. So you take a count, and then based on that count, you're able to say, well, we believe that the estimated size of the population is as such. And so just to qualify what you will hear in this report. So in 2021, the estimated resident population based on the housing census stood at 269,090 people. And that includes 130,037 males and 139,053 females. So the 2021 resident population was estimated to have fallen from the 2010 number of 277,821. So in the 2010 census told us that we had an estimated resident population of 277,821, and the 2021 census told us that we had a population of 269,090. 1990. Now, sir, the composition of those numbers is extremely important for what we're talking about here today. From that census, the 55 to 59 age group represented the largest portion of the population. 19,655 people, 9,204 males, 10,451 females. 55 to 59 age group in 2021 was the highest proportion of the population. Let us compare that with 2010. In 2010, the largest proportion of the population was in the 45 to 49 age group. In 2000, the largest proportion of the population was in the 35 to 39 age group. I will repeat so that members and those listening to me through you, sir, can follow me in the trend. The 2021 census, the largest proportion of the population was found in the 55 to 59 age group, which means what? That's affecting the average. In 2021, most of the people we had were 55 to 59. Compare that to 2010, most of the people we had were 45 to 49. And in 2000, the most of the people we had in the country were 35 to 39. The population of Barbados is aging, on average, is getting older. The median age of the population in 2021 was 42.5 compared to 37.3 in the last census. The average age is higher today than it was in the last census. We know from international standards, from established standards, that populations that have a median age of less than 20 are considered young. So many of our sisters and brothers on the continent of Africa have the distinction of having very young populations with all of the potentiality that brings. So populations with a median age of less than 20 are young. Those with median age of between 20 and 30 are considered intermediate. And those with a median age of greater than 30 are considered old. So the population of Barbados, all of us in here, and all of us outside, taken as a median, are old, sir. Together, collectively, we have to carry that honor. And sir, not only is it aging and old, and I do not say these things to be disparaging, but this is the economic classification that we use. It is also not refreshing itself at a rate that is fast enough to replenish itself. And this is directly related to a decline in births in conjunction with the fact that deaths began on a steady increase from 2014, and there was a crossover of births and deaths occurring in 2016. And so we are now at the place where we have a declining population. We are not replacing ourselves as quickly as we are dying. Now, we also, that is also affected by people who leave. But it is important to note that there has recently been a decline in outward migration of Barbadians. I think that is important to establish. So we have seen, on average, over 60 years, an increase in people leaving Barbados to find work overseas. But that rate of outward migration is actually on the decline. Now, it may suggest many things. That may suggest that the external environment for living and working has been affected negatively, but it may also suggest that the internal environment in the country for living and working has improved, and that people are choosing to stay and make their lives here rather than leaving at the rate that we earlier saw. So we know, sir, that an aging population, if there's no intervention, is going to mean what? That there are decreases in the workforce, that there are increases in the care responsibility by a minority for a majority of the population. So we call that a dependency ratio. And we know that we have increasing dependency ratios. So we know that in households, the number of people depending on the working age population has increased. But sir, there's another anomaly that we see in Barbadian society, many Caribbean societies. Because where you have an aging population, let me pull back and frame this a little bit more clearly. Normally, when we talk about dependency ratios, we are talking about the dependency of those not of working age, so those below or above working age, on those of working age. So the people in your household who are between the ages, say, of 18 and 65. Some dependency ratio calculations prefer to link the dependency ratio to the youngest segment of the population, so the workers between 18 and 35. But the idea is that there are children in that household and there are elderly in that household who are not working and so depend on the income of those that are working. But we have a feature of Barbadian societies where we also see this inverse notion of dependency, where we have a percentage of the population, a part of the household, that is dependent on the income of the aged. We have a percentage of the household that are dependent on the pension or other incomes of the aged. It is actually a reasonably rare phenomenon. And we are seeing this increasing in Caribbean societies. It has all kinds of implications for how we deal with the question of pensions and the preparation of people and families for their later years. It has implications for things like insurance and estate planning, and how we ensure that people of advanced years have the wherewithal to sustain themselves, continue to have access to the assets to which they have always had access, and are not at risk of losing those assets because of issues associated with title and ownership and establishment of that ownership. These are real issues that we find that we will need to address. So we have dependency on the working population, but we also have dependency on the aging population. And there are many of us who speak every day to Barbadians, older Barbadians, who say to us, well, I have the pension, but I also have a son who passed away. I also have a son who is in prison. I also have a daughter who had to move. I have their children with me. I got the 4 grandchildren. And so we also have to consider the dependency ratio, the demands on not just the income of the aging population, but their care responsibility for younger members of the household. And so the population policy that is before us, sir, is telling us that without any intervention, an aging population has implications for the increased care responsibility by a minority of people for the majority of the population. It has implications for declines in government revenues as the employment-related tax base contracts, and a likely decline in what the policy calls, and the authors of the policy call, economic, social, and cultural dynamism. The potential of the economy, of the society, and of the culture to change, to move, to improve, to be impacted by different groups of the population. And we know that that is real and true. We know that there's a different cultural reality and cultural dynamism that obtains when you have a majority young population versus a majority old population. We know that this has implications for how we deliver services to our population, because the way in which you deliver services to people who feel comfortable and at home with their access to technology and their command of technology will be different from other groups. So we know, sir, as well from the population policy that over the next 30 years, the dependency ratio is expected to grow to nearly 2 dependents per person of working age. 2 dependents per person of working age. What we don't have here is what is the dependency ratio on people above working age, which is also increasing, placing strains on families and social care and security systems. And sir, what you will find in this population policy, which is an outstanding framing and approach to the framing, is that at no point has the Commission set aside the notion of care and social relationships. The capacity that we have to reproduce ourselves, and when I say reproduce ourselves, I don't just mean physical, sexual reproduction. I'm not just talking about having more children, I'll come to that in 30 seconds. When I say reproduce ourselves, I mean the following. Households are centers of economic production. Households are not simply consumers, but producers of economic inputs. Those inputs, and perhaps the most important input, is labor, is people. The fact is that what we call the household economy, the domestic economy, economists years ago used to consider households only as consumers. We give households goods and services. As a state, we give households this. As the private sector, we sell households goods and services. But the fact is that one of your biggest economic centers is the household. And so we always have to consider as a state the extent to which we are investing in that reproduction of people, because it's not just babies. When I'm talking reproduction, I'm not talking about babies. I'm talking about the fact that every day somebody gets up and has to make meals for others in the household. People have to iron people's clothes. I know some members in here never hold an iron yet. I won't call any names. Clothes have to be ironed. Meals have to be prepared. When people are ill, they have to be taken to the doctor. They have to be visited in hospital. This is reproductive work. Why? It reproduces the labor market. It means that people can get up and go to work and produce every day. And this population policy, to its immense credit, never for a moment forgets the role of care, nor does it forget the role of environmental and ecological protection in our discussions of population. And so in that regard, the policy tells us that care of the elderly is expected to nearly double in its demand of financing from just under 20% of total health expenditure to nearly 40%. So when people wonder why the government is building a geriatric hospital, the fact is that we know that the nature of health care is changing. Yes, we are delivering health care to an entire population and we are involving people in their own care, but we know that that the majority of the population in that conversation about delivering health care is an older population. So, sir, population policy also considers that the current population structure in Barbados is the unintended result of improvements in socioeconomic conditions and the realization of human rights. And why? Because when you have greater access to quality education, greater labor force opportunities, greater access to healthcare, including sexual and reproductive services, you often find that the corollary of that is a decline in birth and death rates. So the family planning movement of the 70s and 80s was, according to the population policy, a little bit too successful. Similarly, the investment in healthcare has meant that people are living longer. And so this is not a straightforward conversation, because we also have to look at the quality of life issues. We want people to live longer with a high quality of life. And so I am sure that there are others in this debate here and in the other place who will begin to address some of what those investments may need to look like. But I want to say from the outset, sir, that this population policy merely, I shouldn't say merely, this population policy sets a framework for all of the different policies, interventions, pieces of legislation that will need to be triggered across every single sector of government. This is, sir, a development policy. And you'll see in a minute why I say that. But before I go into the purpose of the policy, I want to say something very clearly. Sir, you and the people of Barbados, through you, will, I hope, by the time I take my seat, understand that the call to address the population issues from the government of Barbados, from this government, the call and the need to address population issues is not to say to people, have more children. Somehow, somewhere in the narrative that has escaped, there is a notion that the only response this government has to the population question is to say to Barbadians, have more children. That is not the call. That is not the policy solution that is being put forward by this government. I will go on to some of the policy solutions, but I want us to understand that it would be such a gross oversimplification of the issue and of the attendant solutions to say that have more children is the solution. I would consider my education wasted if that was all I could bring to bear on this conversation. So we will go on to what we are bringing to bear on the conversation. That the purpose of the population policy is to promote sustainable and inclusive development and good quality of life for Barbadians and residents without compromising environmental sustainability and the ability of future generations to meet their needs. I will repeat the purpose. The purpose of this National Population Policy 2023 to 2040 is to promote sustainable and inclusive development and good quality of life for Barbadians and residents without compromising environmental sustainability and the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So the equality that we are seeking, that we are targeting, on which we are insisting, is not just equality today between women and men, between adults and children, between people from rural and urban Barbados, among all groups of people alive today. But we are also seeking to have a degree of care, consideration, and equality between people and the planet, between people and the environment. And then on the other hand, between people alive today and the future generations. So humankind has always had a very extractive approach to how we live our lives, traditionally. earlier industrial revolutions were based on a model of extracting forced labor from subjugated populations and extracting value from our natural environment. That has been the model. What we are saying today is that the model must be, how do we live in alignment with the environment? How do we remove that extractive approach to development and industry? And how do we also ensure that this is not just about the people alive today, but who told you that you are the only one that has a right to enjoy the planet because you happen to be alive now? What about the ones that are joining us in the gallery who will live far longer than we will live? And their children who are not yet here. So the population policy has 3 interrelated policy goals. The first, ensure a population size sufficient to grow and sustain adequate levels of social care, productivity, labor force participation, and revenue for inclusive development. So the first policy goal, sir, is a demographic goal. It has to do with the size of the population that we're aiming to affect. We are aiming to affect the size of the population, and we're aiming to affect the composition of the population. Ensure a population size sufficient to grow and sustain adequate levels of social care. That comes first. Productivity, labor force participation means people's access to decent work and to the actualization of their potential. That's what we mean by labor force participation. We don't just mean coming to work. Having access to decent work and the actualization of people's productive capacity. Whatever I can do, I feel I can do. I have a mug that I drink from, sir, that was given to me by a person very dear to me. And it says, and he gave it to me when I was about to start writing a book, but I ain't finished writing the book yet, so perhaps I should drink from the mug more often. It says, whatever you can do or believe you can, begin it. Whatever you can do or believe you can. Whatever you feel you can contribute to life. The state wants to be able to sustain that positive, productive capacity of people. So it's not just having a job. It is also about self-actualization. Labor force participation and revenue for inclusive development. Sir, let us not fool ourselves. When I was a child, I used to read the now deeply problematic Enid Blyton. We didn't know that at the time. We used to read a lot Enid Blyton, and there was a enchanted forest, and there was a faraway tree, and at the top of the faraway tree, there was something called the land of take what you want. You can imagine that for a child, that was a fabulous place. You climb the tree, and whatever was at the top of the tree used to rotate. So you didn't know what you were getting when you got to the top of the tree. But if you happened to luck into the land of take what you want, you just went there and you got whatever you wanted. And life was beautiful. And wow, to what extent do we believe? How much do we wish that we lived in the enchanted forest at the top of the faraway tree in the land of take what you want? But we do not. The role of the state is to be able to garner resources, to provide economic goods and services, economic and social goods and services to people. I've said in this place many times that that's what economics is. If anybody tells you anything different, it's not. It is the provisioning of goods and services, public goods, private goods, economic goods, social goods, to people, and the means by which you are able to do that. We would be fooling ourselves if we did not believe that we needed to have the revenue base to be able to deliver the kind of life and well-being that Barbadians value. So those are the things we need. We need social care to produce that level of well-being. We need everyone's productivity. We need labor force participation and revenue to do it. We need revenue to do it. We can't do it without that. It takes cash to care, sir. And so policy goal number 2, provide Barbadians and non-Barbadians now and in the future with opportunities for personal development. So by Barbadians and non-Barbadians, it means that you may be a Barbadian or you may be living here and not be Barbadian, but you are here as part of the productive economic and social pool of the country. So provide Barbadians and those who live here now and in the future with opportunities for personal development. That is a policy goal number 2 of a population policy. So I want to be clear that this population policy is a development policy to the extent that we're not just concerned with pulling more people here. Come, we want more people here. That's not the concern. We do have a demographic concern. That's policy goal 1, ensuring a population size that does those things. Policy goal 2, provide Barbadians and residents now and in the future with opportunities for personal development. And policy goal 3, to promote integrated settlement development and safeguard the ecological balance. So I'll start with the last goal to be able to say a little bit about what these goals involve. And I'll start with the last goal because the way in which the population policy frames what we call settlement development. So it's not just that people are living in homes, but that we are living in homes alongside all kinds of other ecosystems. So sub-goal 1 of this third goal, integrated settlement development, how we live, how we establish our communities. Sub-goal 1, reconcile population redistribution, land use, and settlement patterns. Sir, that is your physical development plan. And other pieces of legislation and policy and practice across other ministries that deal with housing, that deal with agriculture, that deal with energy and environment. So this sub-goal 1 under this third policy goal is about how we distribute the population. It has to do, sir, with how we move people around the country. Understanding where people live, why they want to live there, and what they need in order to live full lives there. It means transportation. It means water and sanitation. It means access to housing. But it also means making sure that those of us who want to live closer to the land, in a closer relationship with the land, we farm, we raise animals, we keep bees because we like bees, because we like honey. We harvest other plants or grow other animals because not only of their economic value, but of their relationship to people. So that's the first one. Sub-goal 2, under goal 3, ensure the efficient management of natural resources and the environment. And sub-goal 3, strengthen collective resilience to the impacts of the changing climate. So, sir, in this population policy, there is an entire policy pillar that relates to how we live, how we settle in communities together alongside other ecosystems. Policy goal 2 that I just mentioned, that talks about providing Barbadians and residents now and in the future with opportunities for personal development, includes as its first sub-goal, promote and strengthen the care economy. The care economy, sir, is what I described to you earlier. The fact that there are those of us who care for children, for the elderly, for the ill, for other populations that require care. And, sir, it is so important to understand, and I always emphasize that there's no policy or legislative instrument that stands on its own. This Barbados Labour Party administration has a unity of policy and action, sir, that, not because I happen to be sitting where I'm sitting, but if I dare say, is perhaps unmatched in any other administration that I've seen. What do I mean? We don't just have in this population policy that we are promoting and strengthening the care economy. We have also said in the Minister of Finance's budget statement earlier this year that we are applying concessionary consideration to people who are establishing care facilities. So we have it in the policy, but we have it as well in the practice, in the execution of how we deal with incentives. Gone are the days when only big business captains of industry, controllers of land and wealth get access to concessions in this country. If you are establishing an institution that is concerned with care, then we have said you are also in productive business. Your business is productive, and in that regard, you are entitled, you have access to the same concessions as the people that are building the hotels and bringing in the cars. That is the approach. That is a government that values, that sees, that understands the care economy. Further to that, sub-goal 2, expand access to quality healthcare and wellness service interventions. Sub-goal 3, improve capacity and proficiency of the labor force with access to expanded opportunities. Sir, I haven't hit population size yet. In this population policy, these are the goals, and these are the policy signals to be able to address the question of population. We do not just want quantity, we want quality. We want to be intentional about the lives that we help create through our policy work. So, population redistribution, land use and settlement, natural resources and the environment, collective resilience, strengthening collective resilience to the impacts of climate change. That's on the environment and ecological side. In the personal development side, investing in the care economy. We have the concessions for care. We have the investment in the community elder care program. We have so many other investments in the role of care. I also have to mention, as Minister of Industry and Minister responsible for Export Barbados, sir, the fact that the Pelican village where everybody has been recently enjoying cricket also is building out, as we speak, care facilities for children and for the elderly. And so you'll find under construction, soon to be opened, that we are following through on the promise and on the expectation of care providers who work in town, who work around town, who have this challenge of not just how their children will be cared for while they're earning, but how the elderly in their households will be cared for while they're earning. But not only that, the kind of training and activities that are planned for those facilities will also include digital literacy. We'll also be preparing babies and young people, because that's when they start learning tech. So not just that population, but also the elderly population who find themselves feeling a bit marginalized by technology, that we also bring to bear those kinds of activities in that location. Sir, it is not an island-wide facility, but it is following through on the promise of increasing daycare facilities for children and for the elderly, because we realize that care is a gap in this country, and we are following through on that commitment. It addresses healthcare, and it also addresses expanded opportunities like training and skills development. And now I get to population size, sir. We have a sub-goal 1 that has to do with increasing the population of persons of working age, and sub-goal 2, enhancing family well-being to support reproductive decision-making. Let me repeat. The first goal under policy goal 1. We have to increase the population of persons of working age. We have to. The current population of Barbados cannot, at its current size and composition, sustain the quality of life that Barbadians have demonstrated that we value into the future. Even today, we have to increase the population of people of working age. The reason that the policy solution is not having more babies is that, 1, that is a fickle and not dependable kind of solution. But 2, that it takes too long, frankly speaking. To say, okay, the solution is to have more children, and to leave it there, is to not have a plan. And we are demonstrating, by all that I have said before and what I will say to come, that we do very much have a plan and are very clear-minded about the kinds of interventions that are needed to grow the population, but also to create a population that has this access to choices and to making the kinds of choices that they value. So we must increase the population size. We must increase the population base just to be able to carry us along. We must increase the number of people who will choose to be teachers, nurses, police officers, officers in the army, engineers, doctors, sanitation workers. We have to increase the base of people who will be productive. But we also have to enhance family well-being to support reproductive decision-making. What does that mean? Through the policies of the state, we have to make sure that when people do make the choice to expand their families, that those choices are supported by the state. And that is going to call for all kinds of interventions, not just by the government, not just by the state. And that's why when we came to service in 2018, this government made very visible the role of the third sector and others in helping us to carry some of these conversations. There are many things, sir, on which we are silent. The public discourse has nothing to say. There are many things that make people feel marginalized in their reproductive choices. We do not talk enough about breastfeeding in the workplace. We do not talk enough about pregnancy loss. We do not talk enough about menstruation and menopause, as if there are things to be hidden behind this curtain here. These are the facts of life. These are the conversations that determine how we will be able to support families. But similarly, sir, we also have to make sure that we continue to invest in things like parenting classes. When we talk about enhancing family well-being to support reproductive decision-making, what does that mean? It means that people feel supported, that when they have children, when they grow their families, that the state recognizes and acknowledges the family unit as a productive and important economic and social unit. However, that family is comprised and composed. We don't get to tell people who their family is. People get to determine who their family is. But people must feel supported in making those choices. Returning the free tertiary education that the last government decimated was a way of supporting reproductive decision-making. Why? Because so many of the families who came to me and, sir, we talked about dependency ratios on the elderly population. In St. Michael South Central, there were pensioners who had to find money to send to university and to community college and to SJPI, their 17 and 18 and 19-year-olds in their households, pensioners. That is what dependency ratio on an aging population looks like. And when you remove free tertiary education from a population, from a society of this nature, you're saying to people, you do not have a chance in this Barbados. Supporting reproductive decision-making is sending the signals and showing to people that we are going to give you the wherewithal to send your children to school for as long as they have the productive vision to want something for themselves and to make something of themselves. Supporting reproductive decision-making, sir, means that we are expanding 24-hour access in polyclinics, in the healthcare system. It means that we're investing in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. It means that we are investing in people's parenting capacity. It doesn't look like a single thing, but it has to be and continue to be many things. But I want to turn quickly, before I sit, to the first sub-goal, which is increasing the population of persons. I don't say persons, I prefer to say people. Increasing the population of people of working age. Sir, much of what has to be done, and that is why the population policy pulls together a group of ministries and actors who have to come up with the action that actually actualizes, that is a very clumsy sentence, the activities and the interventions that bring life to this policy. They're not contained in the policy itself. So, for example, we have to, at the appropriate time, look at who gets to be a Barbadian, who gets to call yourself a Barbadian, who gets to be a citizen. There are many in the diaspora with ties to Barbados, family ties to Barbados, that bemoan the fact that they must feel isolated, that they cannot contribute, that if they come here, they're not recognized as Bajan because of how far removed they are, because they might be a granddaughter or of a Bajan father or a grandson of a. Let us have the conversation about people actualizing themselves as Barbadians and how we're able to allow them to do that and to count as Barbadians who are living and working here, if they so choose. But we also have to look at who moves from other parts of the world to come here. And I want to be very clear. The reason that this population policy looks first and foremost at the issues of carrying capacity, that's what this policy looks at. What is the population that we can carry? What are the commensurate levels of investment in things like water and sanitation, road infrastructure, education? Because we have to look at that first. Let us make sure that we build out the wherewithal to then say, we are going to invest in the productive capacity of Barbadians and residents here. We're going to support family well-being to support reproductive decision-making here first. And then we have to say that we welcome those people who are willing to come here and make Barbados their home, contribute to our economic productivity, but also contribute to that social dynamism that the policy speaks to. And we, in coming up with this policy, we didn't leave these cultural and social relational issues to chance. You may not wish me to call them out, but one of the contributions that that Mr. Rudder was able to make to these conversations had very much to do with some of the cultural norms and evolution of a society that starts to welcome others. But Barbados has a history, has a legacy, a proud legacy of welcoming others. I dare say this, every Barbados Labour Party administration has a proud legacy of welcoming others. And it is when they were unceremoniously ejected by another administration that we started to suffer the consequences of our insularity, or of their insularity that they would have wanted to impose on the Barbadian people. But Barbados is a welcoming society. Not only that, we leave here and go all over the world and expect people to welcome us. To live, to work, to stay for a day, to stay for a year, to stay for 20 years. We go. When you go to Panama, you're inclined to stop somebody on the road and say, I know you. You see yourself in people from Panama. You see yourself in people from Guyana. You see yourself in people from Venezuela. All over this globe. We have people excelling all over the world. And we expect when we send people away that somebody is going to treat our children good. We expect that people are going to be accepted and allowed to meet their potential in other environments. By the same token, if we want to ensure that we have and we live in a Barbados that provides opportunity for all, it is time for us to continue the conversation about embracing others who come, and at the same time that we are investing in improving opportunities for Barbadians and those who live here, we are doing the same for those we welcome. It is not a zero-sum game. And let me address now the people who might want to stand in this place. I don't think the ones on the outside would, but stand in this place and suggest that we are choosing the other over ourselves. We are never doing that. Barbados has never, under a Barbados Labour Party administration, done that. It is not a zero-sum game. There's nothing to say that we cannot continue to invest and increase investment in Barbadian people and in future generations and in the environment, and continue to embrace those people who will come and contribute. It is the model of successful societies all over the world. Sir, this conversation, this discussion, I expect to be so rich. I expect to be so all-encompassing that I only want at this outset to frame these matters, to say what is possible, to say what is the policy direction, to say where we expect this policy to take us, and very much, even without getting into the implementation framework and getting into the mechanics of how we roll this out across immigration policy, across education policy, across industry, across labor, which others will do, I just want to frame, one, the fact that this is another of those existential issues that we must now face. We could never believe that in our lifetime, in our generation, that we would not have to face the same life or death, the same fundamental questions that our ancestors faced. Why would we believe that? We have different fundamental questions, but we must confront them. This population policy, sir, benefited from 3 technical stakeholder consultations over October 26 to 27, 2022, each focusing on a different policy goal. You heard me speak to the 3 policy goals. We had consultations with the social partners on November 18, 2022. We had a town hall at Alexandra School in March 2023. a town hall at Princess Margaret School, March 22nd, 2023, a town hall at the St. Michael School, March 23rd, 2023. We had an online Polyspace initiative held, which Kev's Politics, everybody knows Kev's Politics on Twitter, helped us to put together. And we had extensive consultations in informal ways that the commissioners also engaged in and brought to bear on the policy. So we have taken this policy, sir, around the country. We have heard from people on it. And we do not suggest, we cannot possibly suggest that everything that is to be contemplated has been contemplated. And why? Because not everything that will happen that will affect this policy has happened. And so, like most things, we expect this to be a living and breathing policy document that does not just sit here on its own, but through our own execution will manifest in different areas of work, in different pieces of legislation, in different programs across the government. And so, sir, I, with such pride and pleasure, commend this policy to this chamber and through you to the people of Barbados, and ask, sir, that this resolution do not pass.
Honourable for Christchurch South.
I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. I was not physically present when you welcomed the students, the primary school students. I believe you said they're in fourth form of the George Lamin Primary School. And I join with you, Mr. Speaker, and with the chamber in welcoming these young persons, these young citizens, and their teachers to this place. I don't know what they think of Parliament. I don't know what is their concept of Parliament. I know that their teachers will have a fair idea as to what is this Parliament and what happens here and how it happens here. And it is the last question as to how it happens that I wish to make some particular appeal today, since if this is their introduction to this place, we want to give them an assurance that it is a place where constructive debate takes place, constructive speech related to the future of this country and related to their future. And to tell them, through you, sir, that a parliament is a place where laws are made, laws that are made for all citizens of this country, from the very rich to the very poor, and from the very old to the very young. All laws originate in this place. And together with the making of those laws, always is the question of debate. And when we say debate, we are talking about how we speak and what we say towards the making of those laws. And sometimes we agree and sometimes we disagree. And we want to give these young citizens today the assurance, and their teachers, that there are times when debate is vigorous and it contains much contention, much difference. And there are times when it becomes, and I hope their teachers will explain to them these words, when it becomes philosophical, when the debate exists at the level of the idea, and all humankind, all men and women are entitled to have ideas that differ one from the other, towards constructive debate, towards a society in which we can all live harmoniously. So I say again today, through you, welcome to these young citizens and their teachers, and I promise them that we will attempt today to have a debate that is constructive and a debate that will go towards making for a better life in their country. Since I listened to the last, to the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central, very carefully, and I made a number of notes based on the honourable member's contribution, and I will come to those. But today, let us focus on the idea. And the idea, the main idea today is that of population size, and it is an interesting subject when one is speaking to children. Those people who did not turn up here, we brought them here. And they then become a part of this thing we call the population. And listening to the honourable member for St. Michael South Central, it is population size. How do we fit our young citizens? How do we prepare our young citizens for their place within the rest of humanity in this country? And how do they fit in, and how do they take their place? And what relevance is population size to them? I heard the honourable member say quite correctly that none of us in this chamber, none of the 30 who are elected to this place, none of us can consider ourselves young. Those young people up there, those citizens up there, they're the young people. And so every debate must be a preparation for them to occupy this world for the responsibility of which we bear much. So population size, how do we deal with this question of the population and the size of the population? You know, sir, that the modern debate may have its origins in the work of a British economist called Thomas Malthus. And he posited the theory that the supply of food, he focused on the supply of food. Malthus, yes. And a bit of an alarmist at the time. He said that it really is the supply of food that should determine how large the population should be. And I said he's alarmist because he had this preoccupation with keeping population sizes small. I do say alarmist, keep the population small, because if you don't keep it small, the food will run out. There would not be enough food for the people we have. And of course, you know, sir, that over the years, his theory was discredited. He was basically telling the governments of the world and the various populations, keep your size down. If the population becomes too big, the world is going to have a problem. You're going to run out of food, and there will be famine and war and things of that nature. So he has been described as the father of population. This alarmist position that we are at risk of having too many people. Listening to the honourable member for St. Michael South Central, and correctly so, the world now reaches a point, and various parts of the world, and indeed this developing part of the world now reaches the stage where we are discovering that in many cases our populations are too small. And it is of particular relevance in Barbados because of the questions of demography. We have, and we all know this, we have too many, well, you can't have too many old people. We have a lot of old people. And there's an imbalance between the numbers of the old people and the numbers of people who work. Again, the question of work relates itself to economics, because the people who work are there to produce and to be responsible for economic prosperity, economic growth. Indeed, they're there to be responsible for feeding, because at the heart of man's purpose is that question of feeding ourselves. I think, sir, these students are from George Lamin.
A good school.
Excellent.
good
And
school.
a very good school, and well named.
In my constituency.
In your constituency,
That is
what a
correct.
happy coincidence. Now, I trust that they know, and I know they do, the gentleman after whom their school is named, he redefined culture a few years ago. When we were at university, we were taught that culture was the totality of what happens in a society, how people live, their habits, their practices, the way they dress, how they do things, that totality of life. And it was the gentleman after whom their school is named who gave redefinition, he gave new definition to culture. He reduced it to, not reduce, he amplified it to a definition that says, it is the way we feed ourselves. Because he said, he made the point that unless we feed ourselves, nothing else exists, we die. And so for Mr. Lamin, that was his definition of culture, how we feed ourselves. And therefore, every question, every philosophical question that relates to man's existence, man's survival, must come back to how we feed ourselves. I will shortly add to that and to say that how we feed ourselves is not only a question of food, material food, but it will be a question of spiritual food, how we feed ourselves spiritually, psychologically, mentally, and so on. Beg your pardon, sir. And so we learned that Malthus, Robert Malthus, Thomas Malthus was a discredited theorist, that his preoccupation with keeping populations down is now of absolutely no relevance in this part of the world. What we pause and discover is the period within which Malthus lived. He lived from 1766 to 1834. These young students, if they haven't been told, I'm sure they have been having good teachers, 1834 was a year of significance in Barbados. That is when the enslavement of men ended legally here, and then there was a period of emancipation for 4 years, and then Barbadians were told that there was total freedom. You and I will smile at that phrase, total freedom, when we discover that many of us in this country are still trying to be free. And that is not a partisan political statement. That relates to the human condition. Now, Malthus must be considered as having had elitist views, because between 1766 and 1834, when he focuses on material goods, the access to food, it was only a very small minority in England and here in the Caribbean that would have had access to enough food. That is how people lived. There was limited access to enough food. But yet here he was saying, keep the population down because there's a chance that we will not have enough food. But the economists, the progressive economists, would have intervened after that and introduced them to the concept of development. And development is not only about growth, but development is about the enhancement, how we enhance our lives socially and politically and otherwise, and culturally, how we enhance our total life and our total lifestyles. Now, these days we talk a lot about the young people and how they have a different appreciation for life, how they see their society differently. Now, you and I, sir, we are children of the 60s and 70s. And I want to remind you, sir, that when I'm on the subject of this clash of values, today we are still talking about the clash of values between the old people and the young people who seem to see the world so differently, and therefore their behavior is foreign to us. I want to remind you, sir, that when you and I were in the 1970s, particularly at school, they used to ask us to write essays about the generation gap. You and I had those essays to write. And the older people then were seeing us as not within their value system. So that I want to say to you, sir, that the question as to the generation gap, that clash of values, is nothing new. It is something that has occurred from generation to generation. People who have an outlook on life which is different from that of the persons who went before them, and obviously is different from the persons coming after them. What accounts, though, for this clash of values. I'll just give an example. Sometime 2 years ago, I discovered in my country that young people related to crop over in ways that I did not know. For them, it was this period of great excitement, great revelry. I did not know. I really did not know. When you and I were young, you and I looked forward to Christmas. Christmas was our time. Christmas was a time of freedom and joy and happiness. And it was only 2 years ago that I discovered, amidst the merriment, that the young people now seem to have replaced our Christmas with crop over. So that is by itself a manifestation of a difference in cultural values, people's appreciation for what is going on around them, people's personal and social behavior, the way people are relating to each other and the way people relate to society. So that what is happening now in terms of our culture, and when I say culture, I'm talking about our entertainment. In my day, you and I spent an entire year looking forward to December the 25th and the week after that. I've discovered that young people now look forward to August, to Kaduman, and we don't hold it against them. That is their thing, and we hold on and we listen to the calypsos, and we may watch a calypso tent or two, but we have perhaps, you and I have perhaps gone beyond the merriment that the younger ones among us may participate in. But that is evidence, that is an example of this generational shift of values. And that relates itself to population, because the honorable member who spoke about the 3 policy goals. The first was population size, but I'm on to the second, personal development. How do you develop yourself as a human being within the society, within the particular culture? And why, indeed, do younger people have a different outlook than we do, than our generation? So that those young people up there, they will see the world and they will relate to the world differently from you and me, sir. And why? Why is that so? And why did we relate to the world and to the society differently from our parents? And indeed, I want to tell those young people through you, sir, that our parents complained about our values as well, about the changing values. And why do societal values change? I beg your permission to relate it to economic factors. This country was born within an agrarian economy, agriculture. It was a monoculture, speaking in terms of production. And our parents and grandparents would have belonged to a society that was largely agrarian. And living in an agrarian society, we were surrounded by canes. They used to say Barbados is one big plantation. A lot of people don't know that there were canes in Bridgetown. And if you want to see what Barbados really was, drive around Barbados and you will see the large structures, the large mills. And that would tell you, and again, Professor Lamin said, that we all lived in the shadow of the plantation. Literally and figuratively so. We were surrounded by the plantation. So that if we thought we were surrounding the plantation, it was the other way around, because the values of the plantation crept into our lives. Questions of our relationship to authority, whether it was the plantation, the police force, as they used to call it, the school, the church, they all subscribed to a system of social values which spoke to obedience to authority. And that was the agrarian society, the plantation. And of course, you know, sir, that the plantation was about obedience. And therefore, the values that grew out of the plantation society tended to focus on obedience and respect for authority. Along comes education, 50s and 60s, and I always posit that the high point of educational freedom was 1961, when education, we were told that it was no longer a privilege, but that it was a right. And that revolution in education gave rise to the dismantling of the agrarian society. People were no longer, before the 1940s, the average Barbadian who left school, he did something called seventh standard. And I think, sir, they were leaving school at about 12, 13, 14. And they went, unless they had an individual skill, like a carpenter or fisherman. A lot of masons weren't around then, but because most of the houses were wood. Unless they had those individual skills, they went into manual labor. And they went to work for somebody, whether it was a plantation, a factory. The most labor was manual labor. And again, that influenced people's values, a relationship to a boss. And that was the society of our parents. And being in that society, they would have passed on to us their value systems, obedience to authority. And we don't wish to convey to young people that there's anything wrong with obedience to authority. But we want to convey that authority must justify itself with fairness. But that's another issue, that's another discussion for another time. And so we move from the agrarian society into the society of educated people who had access. We moved away from agriculture, and this economy, jobs became service-based tourism. The advent of tourism, the advent even of the office in town. Broad Street used to be a place of merchants selling goods. And then in the 60s and 70s and 80s, the emergence of the office, the availability of services. People started to make services available. Not only tourism, which is our main service, but other services. Something as simple, for example, as the Xerox machines that used to give you photocopies. Things of that nature. And so, as the economy changes from the agrarian to the service, people's values change. And we're talking about the quality of life, personal development, social development, how people relate to each other. We come to a point today, sir, that this country has not known before. And our young guests here today are born into it. They have nothing against which to compare contemporary society against what you and I knew and the members in here. We can tell them about it, but they don't know about it. They have not lived it. They have not experienced it. So for them, that is normative. And I don't want to necessarily talk about what is happening today, but to remind these young people through you, sir, that they must assume some personal responsibility for keeping the peace. And I'm sure the teachers have told them that, so that is an aspect of population and population size to which the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central would have referred, the question of personal development. How do we ask these young people to develop themselves personally? What then will be our contribution to their personal development? What values will we transmit to them? You and I, sir, would want to say to them what has been or what was our experience. Literally from Sunday back to Saturday. On Sunday, you and I woke up, and I'm sure their teachers told them this, but I want them to hear a parliament saying this to them. That we woke up on Sunday mornings, but we didn't wake up. You and I got a lash to get up. Because you and I should never believe that Sunday morning we didn't know about the concept of oversleeping did not exist in your time, in our time, sir. You got a lash, and that's interesting. Get up, you have to go to church. And we had to go to church. I wonder how many of these young people, I really wonder. I hope they don't get a lash. But this is a challenge. We went to church because our parents sent us. It wasn't a personal decision. And I still, sir, I'm on the question of personal development, personal growth, human development, human growth, the making of a human being. And the honorable member who spoke asked a question which I thought so profound. How do we reproduce ourselves? Because when we have children, either as parents or teachers, we're attempting to reproduce ourselves in a sense. And if we are satisfied with our own experience, is it our moral duty to reproduce ourselves in our children? Whether we are teachers, whether we're parents, whether we're police officers, whatever we are, how do we reproduce ourselves? So on Sundays, the old people sent us to church. And you know the experience. You go to church the Sunday morning, whether it's 9 or 10 o'clock, you go back home, you have some food, and our generation loves to tell this story. Sometime in the mid-afternoon, back to church again, because you couldn't go outside and play. And the young people, the children, the forefathers must hear this. It is important for them not only to hear this, but to know this. And not only important to hear and to know, but to understand it. To understand how we as human beings were shaped in terms of self-image, self-esteem, identity. Who were we? Who are we? And who, consequentially, are we trying to reproduce? And so that was Sunday, twice. And if, depending on the kind of parent you have, you're back in church this Sunday night. Revival service. And George Lamin, that is how we were shaped. That is how we were shaped. That is how the week started. The only trip you could take outside the house was to go to church. We used to play cricket in the road, as you know, sir. You couldn't go outside on Sundays because Sundays was a sacred time. And Your Honor, I am on the question of personal and human development. And all this pertains itself to the profound question that the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central asks: how do we reproduce ourselves? I was really drawn to that question and the structure of that question. So that's how the week began. And then from Monday to Friday, school. There are a lot of children in this country today, for one reason or another, they're not attending school. Some of the factors are economic. There is the tragedy that I'm told that some parents are unable to feed their children. I'm told, and a lot of the teachers in this country must now take credit, I'm told that a lot of teachers in this country feed the children out of their own pockets when they come to school. The Honourable Member for St. Philip North, she has not publicized this, but I think she must no longer be allowed to hide her light under a bushel, that she has had, the Honourable Member for St. Philip North has had a breakfast program going for some time as a member of this Parliament, in which she very quietly, and I will allow her no longer to be quiet on it, she has had a breakfast program in one of the primary schools of this country, and I want to commend the Honourable Member for St. Philip North, I beg your pardon, for having that social conscientiousness and to meet a duty to look after the children of her constituency. But that, she does that, the Honourable Member does that because it is a need among some children. And that is one of the tragedies of our contemporary life. But in spite of that, or in our time, Monday to Friday was school. And then Saturday was a time of some, we thought, greater freedom. You probably, I will never tell you how I knew this, how I know this. But our speaker on Saturdays used to be, as a little boy, he would go to the park, Queen's Park, and score when the cricket was being played. He used to put up the tins to indicate the score, so that Saturdays was a time of some greater freedom.
I remember you didn't go to Empire then, putting up the things also. Just asking. Did you not go to Empire Sports Club then, putting up things?
When my friend Carlisle was the opening batsman, yes, but then, as you know, I migrated to Spartan. I did a migration to Spartan. My school was across the wall, so I migrated. But the point is that our lives were quite regimented. Sunday church, Monday to Friday school, Saturday, a bit greater freedom, but still, you were under the control of parents. You were under the control of a society, because at Spartan in Queen's Park, that was a domain of social control as well. The cricket club acted as an agency of social control. So that the point being made is that our culture, our life, our lifestyle was one of social control by the various agencies. And I've identified the church, I've identified the school, and on Saturdays I've identified the cricket club. And of course there's the football club. And of course, for girls, there would have been the netball club. So that was our experience, that we grew up in a time where there were several agencies which exercised control over our lives. So we as parliamentarians have a duty to understand the era in which we now live, an era of much turbulence. Young people's lives are now so turbulent, and these charges of their teachers will discover the turbulence that will attend their life in a few months, and I don't want to scare them. As I said elsewhere last week, a lot of us lose our children when they make that step from primary to secondary. Again, we're on the theme, personal development. You and I are parents, sir, and we know that that transition from primary to secondary traumatizes us sometimes as much as it does the child, because the little baby that we cuddled and kissed, dropping off to school and so on, that's gone. And they get closer to their friends than they have been to us. And it traumatizes us as well. Hurts our ego. We feel that we've lost our little babies. Let me pause and congratulate two of my colleagues, indeed, who must be excellent parents for the outstanding success of their children as announced yesterday. That is the Honourable Member for St. George North and the Honourable Member for St. Philip North, who happen to be here together, sitting one seat separating you, and you are due congratulations. For what you have done as parents, for what you must have done as committed parents in raising a child, and not only raising a child, but raising a child towards excellence. And this is a sincere message of congratulations to both of you, St. Philip North and St. George North. There must be something special about representing northern constituencies. What a happy coincidence. So I congratulate you, and as well the other partner in this arrangement of parenthood. So congratulations. Yes. Now, how do we explain to our young people the era in which they're living? We spoke about agrarian society, which largely has passed. Right Excellent Arobaro, national hero, said, you're going to wake up one morning and find that there's not one cane blade in this country. That time is coming, it appears, because every year the crop gets smaller and smaller. We are moving away from the agrarian society. And to a large extent, we had moved away, except for the token presence of a few cane fields around. We are out of the agrarian society and we are into the society of services. where we buy and sell services. And we are making the further transition to an economy based on entrepreneurship. In your day and mine, sir, I doubt your village, I doubt my village had one self-employed person. Everybody left school, and your parents told you, go and look for a job. They didn't tell you go and be an entrepreneur. I mean, there are thousands of Barbadians now, whether they're doing it at roadside on an itinerant basis or whether they have had the courage to go and rent an office somewhere or go and rent a factory space somewhere. We are now in the era of the entrepreneur. And I have posited earlier that our value systems become an outgrowth of that economic substructure. The economy, in other words, determines what are our social values. And entrepreneurship is about freedom. Because when you're self-employed, you do have, by definition, greater freedom than a man who is employed by a boss. And but what is our responsibility to our forefathers? Do we allow them to get lost in a vortex of what they think is freedom? Or do we maintain and instill in them those human values, those spiritual values, those religious values which sustained us? The point here is, sir, that in spite of economic growth, economic development, in spite of a new prosperity, there's something that must remain constant in the lives of young people within the context of their population. And that thing that must remain constant is their relationship to their God. And it is nothing to be shy about, nothing to be bashful about. If we have a belief, if we are humble enough to believe in God, it is our responsibility to transmit those beliefs and the values that spring from those beliefs onto our forefathers, onto our children. Because whatever is their destiny, whatever is their future, within this thing we call population, within this arrangement where they are forced to relate to other people, they're not going to live in caves by themselves. They're going to live in a society in which they're relating to other people. And the values, the state of their heart and the state of their minds will influence the quality of their life within this population. And so I want to say to the young people who are present with us today through you, sir, that they're living in a different society, different from the one in which we lived. But we want to reintroduce them to the values that sustained us, the values that made us who we are with our imperfections. We weren't entirely bad people because we survived and we reproduce. But as the Honourable Member said, how do we reproduce ourselves? And what a noble objective that must be. When you try to reproduce yourself, and it is not about vanity, it is not about ego, but it is about self-esteem and belief that what your parents made of you, you are willing to sustain in yourself, and even more nobly, to pass it on to young people. So I want to commend to these young people, I don't think their parents are here, but to ask through you, sir, of them that they develop a relationship with values, not only with material goods, and do not let material goods be your God. Because we are discovering on a daily basis, on a weekly basis in this country, what the pursuit of material goods at the expense of God can do to young people. And I did not wish to introduce the subject to this Parliament nor to them, but they're surrounded by it. We want them to live long lives. We want them to live good lives. We want them to live lives in a society in which there's respect for the other person and respect for his right to life. And not only respect for his right to life, but respect for your right to life. Because somebody told me quite tragically a few years ago that a lot of the young people who populate the place in St. Philip, they don't have a life plan. They don't plan to live. One fellow said, I don't think I'm going to live to 30 or past 30. Another said 40. And that is a tragedy. If our parents had that plan for their own lives, you and I would not be here. None of us would be in here. And so there has a change. There has been a change, I beg your pardon, that now envelops this society in which there's a certain drift among our young people. And this is not a partisan statement, because I think that there needs to be a collective approach to the destiny of our young people. And we need to give them an anchor and ask them, what is your anchor? What is it that makes you who you are? And to say to them that it is not a big chain. It is not what they call, I don't know, the brand names, Puma or Adidas or Nike. It is not that. It is not the privilege of coming to school in a nice car when the fellow next to you may be coming to school in a not so nice car. That is not your anchor. And the anchor which I prescribe, and I'm a sinner, Your Honor, I am a sinner. I am a sinner who recognizes that my upbringing was one in which I was handed an anchor of moral values to fit in with this population. So when we talk population, and it is fine when we talk economics, when we talk constitutionalism about the right to life and the right to associate and so on, the Constitution does not prescribe that a person should adhere to godly principles or to God. It mentions it in the preamble, but then it goes on to deal with more everyday matters. And so, while we plan our populations, while we redesign our populations, my plea to our young four-form guests is for them over the next 6 years, between 12 and 18, to find that anchor in their lives. Find that thing that will make of them young men and young women, that will give formation to who they are. And when I speak about giving formation to who they are, giving formation not only to personality, but giving formation, more importantly, to character. Who you are, who you become, how will others regard you? Will you be a person given to fairness? And I want to give them some statistics here. And to say to them through you, sir, that we probably do not understand or appreciate how this society has been so injured by the loss of so many of our young men. As between prison and the cemetery, we have lost so many of our young men from a society that would have been willing to embrace them if they had an anchor, a moral anchor, and I commend a religious anchor. And whenever one passes and I look at the media, my first concern always is, did they have children? And more often than not, they do. At 20, 21, 22, 23, there's often a 5-year-old that they've left behind, or 2-year-old who will not understand the absence, who will not understand the funeral, and who will only understand the place in St. Philip if the officers up there allow him passage in. And one of the saddest times in the life of a criminal lawyer is to visit an accused, a client at the prison. I don't do a lot of it now, sir, as you know. Very little, I do. But one of the most depressing moments is to go to that prison and you see a young man comes to the window and his family is there and there's a little child touching the glass. She can't even touch him. She or he can't even touch him. And who knows, he may be behind that glass and the iron for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And if he stays there, there's a greater chance that he will keep his life. And we now know that if he comes out, he could lose his life. What a quandary, what a dilemma that is confronting the lives of young people. But the point is, in looking at population, let us look at the question of the loss of our young men between the ages of 18 and 30. That is a traumatic and dramatic loss to this society, to this society's population. How do we solve the problem? And how then do we solve the problem of the child that is left behind? The child is not a problem. The circumstances are problematic. No child is a problem. We must never see a human being as a problem. It is the circumstances in which he lives that become problematic. And in population planning, while we look at NIS and an aging population and the pressure that is being put on a smaller population of working people and the lack of resources for that youngest set of the population, let us consider, let us build into our plans the loss of that young male population to the prison and to the cemetery. How do we deal with the consequence of their absence from society? How do we deal with that? I will wrap up, sir. The Honourable Member for St. Michael's South Central, therefore, looked at the 3 policy goals in the recitals to the resolution. The first is population size. I think we now are all agreed that Malthus has been discredited and that we accept that the age distribution across our population becomes problematic. Not that we have too many old people, but the problem is that we don't have enough young people to support them. That is where the crisis lies. We'd like some more old people too. We would like some more old people because there is no child as happy and lucky as a child that is in a house with a grandparent, the extended family. You and I know about that, sir. That we now exist in cocoons. The mother is on the phone. The ladies will pardon me. The father is watching sports, and the children are looking at their phones. And that has become the home in Barbados. You and I did not know that home, sir. Even that is problematic. Even that becomes an origin of crisis. And I ought to have said that technology is doing great harm to our society. The abuse that children suffer in staring at their phones. Those phones are abusive. Those iPads, those tablets, whatever you call them, the messages coming on those, the majority of the messages are abusive of children. And that is something we need to correct. In the election that is going on in England, both parties have suggested that the technology should be removed from children. That is part of the program, that is part of the manifesto pledge of both major parties, the Conservatives, and the Labour Party, so that we in this part of the world also need to focus, when we are looking at population, the damage and the quality of life of our population, the damage that our technology, our cell phones, the damage, the abuse that it is visiting on children. This thing called there's some phenomenon, don't remember the name, but it has taken our children away from books. Apparently, you can now transmit a message to a child and you're not supposed to go beyond 90 seconds. No wonder the children sit and stare all day, because they're not taking in anything. It's almost hypnotic. These messages and images just keep coming at them, and at the end of the 12 hours, they do it for 12 hours, you know, sir. And at the end of that 12 hours, they've learned nothing. And if they had a lifestyle of sitting and reading a book at least for 2 hours every day, their lives would be fundamentally and qualitatively different. So that I trust that the public library shall once again become, as you and I knew it, sir, on Saturday mornings, a haven for young children. Whether it's the Bobbsey twins or whatever book, but we have local books now. But the quality of life, they're now enslaved to technology, and that is something when we're looking at population and when we're looking at personal and human and social development, we need a reshaping of lifestyles that our population find themselves engaged in. And the emphasis must be on the children, because we are steeped in our ways. And if we are steeped in good ways, let us pledge as a parliament, let us pledge as a population of persons of adulthood to pass on the values that have shaped us onto our children. Now, the honourable member mentioned the third of those, I do notice in the paper, the third of those policy goals relates to ecological balance and appreciation for the environment. How do we relate to our environment? I know the honourable member for Christchurch West Central, whom I have previously in here congratulated for transforming the landscape of Barbados. A lot of places that were untidy became tidy. I don't know, look, I drive up my Lord's Hill every evening on my way home. The honourable member for St. Michael East, I saw him a few minutes ago. And as you're coming to the Normanelles, there's an area on the right. That area used to be so ugly and untidy. And it's now a garden. And every evening I pass there, I admire it, because I knew what it was before. And when we were at school, sir, you and I had the jar with the seed, I don't know, and the blotting paper. And we took it home. And as it grew and grew out and became a plant, we took it back to school and presented it to the teacher. You and I know about that, sir. I trust that still happens in the schools. I trust we are still educating our children as to the environment and the need to keep it green, the need to preserve what mankind over the centuries of its existence has not been able to make a tree. God makes the trees. And so when we have an appreciation for the ecology, we develop an appreciation and a love for God. Sometimes these messages are so easy to transmit to children. Do we transmit them? Do we do it enough? I suspect we don't. But I know that the George Lamin School, honoring the name of that great Barbadian after whom it is named, would have produced excellent little children. The time is now for us to congratulate them for having succeeding in their exam, for having graduated. Let us today treat this as a graduation ceremony for them, and an interesting graduation ceremony, and to once again commend to them, in spite of their lifestyle differences, lifestyles that will be so fundamentally different from ours, to prescribe and to commend to them that they should anchor their lives, if not in something religious, in something spiritual, a relationship with what God has put inside them, inside their heart. And They know about the story of Eden, the garden in which God has put them, and to preserve that garden, and to grow plants, and to respect plants, and to appreciate it. All of nature becomes a part of human development. You can't put a man to live unless he's in prison in 4 cement walls. And while you're free, let them have an appreciation not only of their human society, but of the physical environment, which is an enhancement to life. And so, Your Honor, I want to associate my own views with the noble objectives of this resolution on the Barbados population policy, to express my rejection of Malthus and all that he spoke about, and to recognize that there must be a reversal, that rather than trying to fit a small population into scarce resources, that our objective should be to make this economy larger, ensure that we have a larger segment of that population which is productive, whether we do that by way of sex or immigration. Let us do it. What is our optimum population size? Is it 280? Is it 300? Is it 280,000? Is it 300,000? Is it going to be 350,000? The planners will tell us. But I'll give you this anecdote. I spent 18 months in litigation in one of the islands of this Caribbean. And I used to say to them, but you know, you don't have enough people here. So that if a chap wants to do body work for a living, not enough cars to sustain him. And that economy necessarily became based on tourism. Large hotels, and the overwhelming majority of people work in those hotels. And if you're not in the hotel, at whatever level, management, mid-management, lower skills, you went into the public service. And they lived well, but it was not a very sophisticated society in terms of its economy. It was a very basic society. And and the quality of life, it was boring actually. So that the quality of life was not what we have here. But we have, I think, a fairly optimum size country here. I often say it is large enough, the population is large enough that you can go to St. Lucie and not be recognized. You still meet strangers in Barbados. And it is not so small that you butt up on somebody as in Bermuda or the other country in which I was for 18 months. So that I think Barbados is charmed in that respect, that we have a society that is not too large, or a country and a population that is not too large, neither is it too small. But the question, how do we create that ideal quality of life? How do we distribute resources? If I didn't say it before, I'm going to say it now. And if I had said it before, I'm going to repeat it. At the heart of economics is this question of scarcity. And when Malthus wrote, he was really writing about scarcity. If you discuss economics in Barbados now, the question of scarcity still arises. And I heard a very interesting position taken on economic development. That is something, I am not going to discuss it presently, but that is something that will be looked at and relooked over the years to come. And I will leave that for a future discussion. But just to say to you, Your Honor, I commend any effort to address issues of population, and in the presence of the young people who are with us today and their teachers, welcome. And please shape your lives according to the values of your parents, the things your parents tell you. Fit in as an important member of this population. Fit into this population as a good and upstanding citizen, a citizen who will have respect for other citizens. You will change over the next 6 years, but do not change that person of love and generosity and faith. Those values that your parents instilled in you over the last 12 years, do not abandon those values. You will get taller. You will run faster. You will take in more knowledge. You will get brighter. But carry those values with you. Please carry them with you. Because the future of this society is not the future of this parliament. The future of this society is not the future of any member of this parliament where you are visiting today. The future of this country is your future, 12-year-olds. How are you going to manage it? We have a responsibility, we of this age group, we of this parliamentary group, have a responsibility to pass laws, as the Constitution says, for the peace, order, and good government of Barbados. That is our responsibility. We pledge to meet that responsibility. But you as children have a responsibility as well. How will you meet that responsibility? Please don't abandon the virtues, the values of love for your neighbor. And I want to tell you that at the heart, we call this a Christian society, a religious society. And at the heart of Christianity is love, humility, and justice. I know that you know what is love, although at your age you are shy about expressing it to a group. You probably hear the word humility, and humility begins with deference to God, acknowledging the power and the supremacy of God, and to taking your place in a society, accepting that the person next to you has equal rights as you do, and justice. Please don't go to the courts looking for justice. Practice a form of justice in which your teachers would have told you, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. When I was your age, and before I reached your age, that is what was written across the top of the blackboard when I first went to school, Grace Hill Primary School. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The golden rule. And it will not change for your lives. That is what justice is about. So carry with you that Christian message of justice, humility, and love. And it is demonstrated, it is written in the Bible, love thy neighbor. That is what the Bible says to you, children. That is what the Bible says to all of us, Mr. Speaker. And Parliament is not normally like this. But I think we have a responsibility today to show these children that even in this place, we can find debate that speaks to harmony, debate that speaks to the idea of harmony, debate that speaks to the idea of creating a better society. So, having said all of that, sir, I want to commend the population study to these young children and to Barbados. I don't think any document will ever pretend to be a complete document. I don't think it would pretend to be a complete document. It goes from 2023, I think, to 2040. I heard that while I was in my car. So that a time will come, perhaps when these children will occupy these positions and will want to revisit what they believe should be the future prospects for our population. Your Honor, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that this resolution, further consideration of this resolution be postponed.
The question is that this further resolution, debate on this resolution be postponed. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. Further debate on this resolution hereby postponed. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the House until next Tuesday. Adjournment until next Tuesday, the 2nd of July at 10 a.m.
The question that this honorable chamber be adjourned until Tuesday, the 2nd day of July 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 2nd of July 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.